We conclude today the 18th chapter. This chapter gives us a definition of what a Jew is, the Jewish soul, and gives us something very unique about the Jewish soul that, pray tell, doesn't exist elsewhere, as the Alter Rebbe will explain in this uniqueness. So, where does this soul come from? Started yesterday explaining it comes from Chachma, divine wisdom. Now, everything, even a blade of grass, comes from divine wisdom, ultimately is connected because there's a wisdom in even a blade of grass. Actually, the wonders of God you could see in creation. So everything ultimately has the stamp of divine wisdom in it, no doubt. But when we speak about the Chachma over here, we're talking about the internal aspect of the Chachma and the uniqueness of this Jewish soul being an expression of Chachma, of divine Chachma. Now, there's something intriguing, a paradox about Chachma. We translate Chachma as wisdom, but it's not a very good translation. That's what Chachma is. Chachma is a vessel, a container of the Ein Sof, of the infinite of God. And to be a container for the infinite of God, it needs to be empty. So it's actually empty of any intelligence. Right? Just as God is beyond intelligence, the Ein Sof, the limitlessness of God, intelligence is a creative thing of God. God's not limited to it. So the source of divine intelligence is Chachma, but in and of itself is beyond it. It's beyond comprehension, beyond understanding, and therefore it can be a container for the Ein Sof, the limitlessness of God that is beyond understanding. And yet, from it, it is the source of intelligence. It's the source of intelligence, right? The source of comprehension. In other words, from it goes into Bina, to bring an understanding. So just take it on human terms for a moment. And we're talking about divine terms, but let's take it in human terms. Chachma is that kind of seed, that flash of ingenuity that comes, eureka, I got it. You know, when you had a problem with something and, well, you don't really get it. You just got the light of it. You got the inspiration of it. But you didn't get it fully because it's easy to lose it. You know, if someone gives you a little nudge and you kind of refocus on something else and you kind of lost it. Now, it could come back because it came once, it can come back again. That flash of ingenuity, that flash that has the seed of everything, but it isn't anything until it's developed, right? Just like a seed until it becomes the tree, right? But it has it all. It's the source of it all, of the tree. So it's the source of the intelligence, of the comprehension of which is in Bina. So that's the paradox of Chachma. And that's why etymologically Chachma brings out the duality. It's Chachma is the letters Koach Ma. Koach means a power. A power means it's something, right? It's a something because it's a power. It's a power. So it means it's got parameters. It's got some kind of definition. But it's Koach Ma. It's the power of what? Meaning beyond. So it's a power. It's got parameters. Any power has definition. It has you know, what that parameters defines the thing, whatever the thing be, right? Like, you know, here, this mug, my Tanya Rabbi mug, right? That has some water in it. The borders, the parameters define it in the fact that it is a mug and not something else. It could have maybe had bigger borders and would be maybe a pan and not a mug, right? And so therefore, that's when we say power, so it's got some kind of definition, but it's the power of what? Beyond. Beyond. So that's what the word means, because it is beyond, and therefore it's a container for the Ein Sof, for the limitlessness of God, which is beyond comprehension, right? And that's vested in Chachma. So that's the root source of the Jewish soul, right? Now, as I said, everything comes from, has a of Chachma, but kind of passes through it. I'm not going to define non-Jewish souls today. I'm just, which come from Bina more, the next level, but that's not the point over here. The Alter Rebbe doesn't do that. But another time we can do that. Or first we got to learn the teachings itself. So because of this, that this is the root source of the Jewish soul, therefore all Jews, no matter who they are, scholarly, illiterate, children, doesn't matter. They, meaning those who have no knowledge of God, right? No awareness of God. And that comes from Bina. Awareness is in Bina. Chachma is beyond comprehension and therefore awareness of God. But that's where the soul comes from. So therefore, if an individual has no awareness, no knowledge of the greatness of God, yet they believe in God. Why? Because their soul is rooted in a Chachma that is beyond comprehension and understanding. That's the root of the soul. So faith represents the ability to grasp that which the intellect cannot. And that's inherent to the Jewish soul. That's what it says, King Solomon says, a fool believes everything, but the clever man understands. Meaning, whatever you can understand, you should understand. If you only believe in something, then that's a fool, right? So when it comes to worldly matters, understand it. Don't just believe, understand it. But when it comes to God, who God himself is beyond intelligence and knowledge, then therefore there's no way we can comprehend him, then all of us are fools before God. And therefore, we grasp him only through faith. And this is what King David said. I am foolish and ignorant. I am as a beast before you, as I'm constantly before you. Now he's approaching, King David is saying, I'm approaching you, God, as a fool, like a beast, meaning irrationally, through faith, precisely. As a result of that, I'm constantly with you. Therefore, I'm constantly with you. In other words, if I'm trying to get God and be rational about my understanding of him, I will not be constantly with him. By the way, that doesn't mean we don't try to rationally understand the ways of God and his teachings of the Torah. Absolutely. We use our rationality to understand, our logic to understand Talmud, of course, absolutely. That's his teachings. And even when it comes to the ways of God. But ultimately, to be constantly before and with God, the only way that can be done is through faith. Now, faith here does not mean, it means it's beyond knowledge. It's beyond comprehension, as God is beyond comprehension. But the faith that we're talking about over here is like, Chachma is the idea of seeing. We see that the truth, we don't comprehend the truth. Hearing is about understanding. Right now you're listening to me. I mean, you're watching me, but by watching me you're not understanding. But by hearing what I'm saying, word by word, sentence by sentence, you are comprehending piece by piece and putting together an idea. That's bina, that's understanding. Right? That's hearing. I hear you. Seeing is chachma, is the idea of chachma. So the soul sees God. That's its faith. When we say faith over here, we don't mean, and even though we're saying we approach God like a fool, right? Like, in other words, meaning that we know that our connection to Him is beyond what we understand of Him. Right? All of Chassidus is trying to understand the ways of God in creation. So what you can't understand, you need to understand. But ultimately, our connection to God, the Ein Sof, is beyond understanding. We can understand Seder Ishtalshalis, the way of God within creation. Because that's what we learn here, so much of it, especially in the second part of Tanya, of Shar Yichud Be'emunah, to understand the Creator within creation. Yet, the relationship that we have to God, being that the soul is rooted in Chachma, is beyond what we comprehend. It's not limited to what I appreciate and understand of Him, and that's what I connect to Him. Being that it's, again, based in the divine Chachma, Koyach Ma. It's a power, but a power of what? Beyond comprehension, as God is. And therefore, the soul is a vehicle for the Ein Sof, the limitlessness of God. Okay, so what's the consequence of that? That's like very philosophical. So here the Alter Rebbe says something very powerful, and I suggest that this is a consequence of this teaching that is only found by a Jew and not found by any other persons of the world. And you'll understand why in a moment. Therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, as a rule, the most worthless of worthless and the sinners of the Jewish people, who don't live for God, but they will sacrifice their lives to sanctify God's name and even suffer harsh torture rather than denying their Jewishness, which their Jewishness means their connection of the soul to God. Even if they were boors and illiterate or ignorant of God's greatness, and even if they do have some knowledge, or those who were scholars and did have great knowledge, they did not do it because of their knowledge and because of their appreciation of God. Rather, they sacrificed their lives without any knowledge or reflection even. But they did it absolutely because it's impossible for them to renounce the oneness of God, because their soul is bound up in that oneness of God. And they do it without any reason or rational argument whatsoever. Readiness for martyrdom, not intellectually motivated. Meaning, there are those who live for something. You know, the old saying, if you don't have something to die for, you have nothing to live for. So there are people ready to die for something because they live for it. That's what their life is all about. So they're ready to die for. That makes sense. That's logical. So you're ready to die for God because you lived for Him and you understand their value and their reasoning and so on. And actually, for many, they actually feel that they're getting a better bargain by dying, taking some people with them. You know, it's better to die because you're going to get more on the other side. But that's a calculation. So it's doing it for your benefit. That's everybody in the entire world does what's beneficial for them. Some people have a death culture and therefore they will die because it's better for them to go with a bang, excuse the expression, and take others with them, innocent people with them, because that way they will get more on the other side. That's not at all what we're saying here. That's the way of the world. That's the way of others, but not the Jew. The Jew is ready to die, not because they want to die, not because it's better on the other side, not because they're going to get more. It's because they will not sever their connection to their Jewishness, to their God. They will not do that. This is because the oneness of God illuminates and animates their entire soul. Yeah, even though they didn't live this way, but all of a sudden at that moment of, the sword, right? Or, what I'm talking about. There was no option for most, as a rule. Not it's not 100% that way, but as a rule, because because while they were living life, the chachma of the soul didn't express itself. When they were put to the test of faith, that faith came out and said, this line I'm not crossing. I'm not going to disconnect myself, because the light of the Ein Sof is vested in the Jewish soul. And regardless of your awareness, your commitment, your knowledge, the Jew is ready to give up their lives because of the faith. The faith means here, the faith that's rooted in the soul. That's what it means, the faith over here. Faith doesn't mean like, oh, I got faith in you, God, that you're going to be good to me. That's not the faith we're talking about over here. Faith means over here that this is me. I'm not ready to give me up. I didn't live as me, as a Jew, but all of a sudden, the Nekudas Hayadis, that Pintele Yid, the point, the quintessential point of the Jew, of their Jewish soul, came to the fore, and hence, this is the consequence. That's a very powerful idea. So therefore, the self-sacrifice is not to gain something more on the other side. It's not a result because of, the natural consequence of someone who was ready to, lived for something that was worthy for them to die for, that when the moment came, they're ready to give up their lives. That's all logical. That's coming from Bina. A soul that comes from Bina, understanding, that conforms with, that's comprehensible. That's worthy, makes sense. Now we're talking something far and above beyond that, of Chokhmah. All right, folks. Any questions, any thoughts, any comments? see any questions so far. I hope there's great clarity here. Rachel, I do see a question on Instagram. Is it possible that a non-Jewish soul who pursues the secrets of the Torah for the sake of the knowledge receive divine inspiration and divine protection through its, though it's only for knowledge? I don't know. I'm not clear what you mean by that, Rachel. Is it possible that someone who isn't Jewish, who pursues the secrets of the Torah, the sake of knowledge, maybe not. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say so, because just for self-fulfillment. It sounds like it's just self-fulfillment. Right? That's what it sounds to me, as opposed to something more than that. Mike, on Clubhouse, please share with us.
Hey, what's up?
Thank God, good stuff.
I definitely enjoyed a lot of what you had to say. A couple things I would quibble with.
Go ahead.
When it comes to people, wanting to sacrifice themselves for God, I think this is more of a relic of the ancient world, and that if you look at the more comprehensive knowledge that we have now, and one of the processes that we understand better in the modern world is evolution. And we see evolution both at the physical level and at the social level. So I always, start to question practices that are basically a form of self-flagellation, where basically you want to punish yourself, and that you believe that will gain God's favor somehow, up to and including allowing yourself to be killed or killing yourself. I don't think that this is actually correct, just because, it is possible to, in essence, miscalculate and to believe in basically a popular delusion and then project that onto God. It's like you mentioned, it's like God is infinite. So, you can't reduce the infinite to some subset and say, well, these are the things we prefer about God, so we are going to characterize God based on our preferences, simply because God is in actuality infinite. So, you start to run into some issues there. And, is it evolutionarily a successful strategy to self-flagellate? Maybe. Within certain societies, this might be a technique to kind of refine societies, self-discipline. I mean, you see this in Judaism, on Yom Kippur.
Right.
Like, people fast on Yom Kippur. It's like that's technically a variation on self-flagellation. Have some people throughout history, die. Maybe they had some kind of condition like diabetes or something like that, and not eating for a day caused them to die potentially. So there can be risks to doing these things.
Right. So let me. You said a lot there.
But it's like, if your philosophy is diverging from evolution, is it really congruent with God's largest activity? That's my point.
So thank you for sharing a lot of points that you made there. So first of all, just sorry, 1 second. That left door is open. So first of all, it's just concerning Yom Kippur. If someone is not healthy, then by Jewish law they're not allowed to fast. So, yeah, we don't believe that you should put yourself at risk, and put yourself in a position where you, God forbid, your life is at risk. Absolutely. So that's correct. We shouldn't do that. And you need a competent rabbi who can help you with that, based also on what the doctors have to say. But that's as far as the Yom Kippur. Here the point is not about self-flagellation. We're talking about, let's be very clear, like the Crusades, when the Jews had an option, the cross, to accept the cross, or the sword. And you had people who did not live for God, but yet they died for God. You had in the Holocaust such stories of people who didn't live a Jewish life, but yet all of a sudden they couldn't disconnect from their Jewishness. And that this is the faith of the soul, that it is bound up, and at a certain point, when it's a question of faith, a question of connection, right, that you're ready to give up your life. And it's not a logical thing, because logic would say that, if you live your life for something, so then that's something worthy to die for. But that's not what has happened throughout history. And even, as recently, as recently as the Holocaust. Yes, today, that's not such an issue, and how that expresses itself today, that's another point that we'll get to throughout these teachings. But that's the real point over here. Thank you for that, Mike. Thank you. Sorry, something just came up, and I want to entertain more questions, but I can't. We're going to have to continue this discussion tomorrow. Okay, we will tomorrow. Just something I've got to deal with at the moment. So tomorrow, Mike, come back and join us. All right. I'm sorry, I can't continue. I know there's other people with questions, but the discussion will continue to the next chapter. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you for Chabad Zuch and Kadesh, Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you Tanya. Rambam coming up. Thank you.